emergency for the first time in about
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 696.MK1618. Certificate number 527. That's a short certificate number.
Maybe the shortest ever.
Laetrile.
Twice Mr. Vale was told by doctors he had terminal cancer, and twice he survived, and gave much of the credit to eating apricot seeds for the Laetrile inside, which some people consider an alternative anti-cancer agent.
Because you and I both love to talk about patent medicines.
We do.
We love nostrums. Nostra.
Nostrils. We've been holding off in releasing our own homeopathic medicine cabinet, which is going to have 11 different medicines guaranteed to.
Each one cures everything, so it's not clear why we have all 11 of them.
Hair loss. It's going to return elasticity to your skin. It's going to plump up your lips.
Hangnails, diabetes, Parkinson's. We do it all.
It's going to tighten your anus.
Everything will tighten your anus, but that's just because it tastes very bad. It's got that sour taste.
That means healing.
Yeah, a Sour Patch Kid. When you feel those sphincters tighten after you eat a Sour Patch Kid, you're like, oh, that's good for me.
Yeah, that's nice.
That's
nice. That sour taste.
That's what I needed.
Yeah,
that's what my body craves.
That's right. Well,
citric acid.
It's the electrolytes that plants crave, but it's also there's going to be an element. Part of my contribution is you're going to smoke some banana peels, right? That's a good way to really see into your future.
I had a banana peel right here.
Yeah.
Do we have to dry them first, or can I just eat the banana and then within minutes be smoking the?
No, you can't smoke a wet banana peel. That's right there on the title page of the Bible.
I feel like that's your memoir. Doesn't that sound like some goofy 1970s? You can't smoke a wet banana peel by the Smothers Brothers.
I've always been looking for a good title for that.
It's like George Carlin's failed book. You can't smoke a wet banana peel.
But patent medicines are an American. There's an American as apple pie.
Many are not patented.
Apple pie is a great cure for gingivitis.
Is that true?
Well, yeah. If you take my condensed apple pie tincture.
You've been making a semi-synthetic apple pie unguent.
Yeah, I took apple pie and I reduced it down to a white crystal powder, and then you smoke it.
You've got the apple molecules and the pie molecules in there. We both know a little bit about Laetrile, the subject of this entry, because this had been requested by a listener named Mark, and we talked about Laetrile on the show before.
Yeah.
And we were both
comes up.
We both were so enthusiastic. We both read up on Laetrile and thought we were going to do the show.
Yeah, it's exciting. We hardly ever are doing a show where we're both avowed experts.
I would say the most common omnibus case is that neither of us knows anything about the topic of the day. This is an unusual show in that we are both really at the forefront of academic research on this topic.
What's interesting, of course, is that there's a lot of chemistry involved in Laetrile, but at the end of the day, none of the chemistry really factors into the story.
It does not.
Because
it doesn't work.
Because it doesn't work, and so who cares what its chemistry is? I mean, whatever the actual application for Laetrile is, it isn't why it's a famous compound.
I learned incidentally why patent medicines are called patent medicines.
Oh, go on.
And most are not patented.
Sure.
I believe the characters of our story did patent some of their medicaments. Yeah, Laetrile has been registered with the U.S. Patent Office by the quacks responsible.
That's good. Well, it is a naturally occurring substance, but that in a refined state could be, sure, patented as a, what is it, the process that's patented or the powder?
I believe pharmaceutical patents were not legal for much of the 20th century, but at some point they were legalized. You have to patent it for a purpose, and in this case...
was it patented as a cancer treatment?
No, disorders of intestinal fermentation.
Sure.
Boy, I've had a DIF before. I don't know about you.
I just drove across the country, and the other people in my truck would say that I had a case of it. Yes.
You need to take a little more Laetrile. Your dosage is not high enough.
That's right. Right. Just prior to being fatal, but just enough to keep you.
Yeah. There's a
gassy.
very narrow sweet spot where you have not died yet. In fact, patent medicines take their name from letters patent.
Okay.
Which European royalty would, patent meaning open, like in the sense of patently obvious or something. Letters patent were letters that were written by a personage of importance.
That gave you kind of it was like a letter of introduction.
Yes, and crucially, they're for public consumption. Once you have a letter patent from His Majesty or Her Majesty, you can show it to anyone.
Right.
Whereas they would also write letters close, I think, which would be the private sealed communication of the crown.
Only to Bismarck.
Right.
I had a letters patent at one point.
From you or to you?
So the first time I went on a trip to Europe, it was in the 1980s, and I was going, I was a college student, long hair, hippie.
You've never mentioned this. Where did you go?
I spent 7 months wait a minute. You were teasing me.
Gotcha.
So anyway, I'm in Europe and I'm wandering around, and my father, in advance of me going, my mom did the thing where she sewed $300 underneath a patch on the back of my backpack. But my dad actually went to Senator Ted Stevens of Alaska, who's a family friend, and he said, "Senator Ted, I want you to write a letter of introduction for the boy."
This will wow the innkeepers from Belgium to Moldova.
I think his hope was that if I ever got arrested, I could pull, if it was ever like one of these Midnight Express situations.
First of all, I have no idea how that paraphernalia got in my backpack. And second of all,
there's $300 under this patch, but if that doesn't work.
Senator Ted Stevens of Alaska thinks that all those people in that room were of age.
So in that little pouch that I hung around my neck, along with my passport, was a letter from U.S. Senator Ted Stevens in a Ziploc bag that said, "I want you to give this boy all of the finest."
How was the letter doing the voice?
I think
the font conveys it.
Any Marine standing at the front of a U.S. embassy in Kiev would have read this letter. I would have been there standing like, "Let me
Put me on the helicopter. Put me on the helicopter."
And they would have read it, and they would have heard Senator Ted's voice saying, "The internet is a series of tubes."
Do you feel like senators still get a lot of requests for that? Like,
I'm sure they do, from privileged dorks whose
kids are going on study abroad.
Yeah, although I don't
Gap year
anymore, it doesn't matter. I may have been the last person that carried around a letters patent.
That's what I'm wondering, if you were it.
What's crazy is I don't think I kept it. I don't know where it is now. I should have it.
Well, think of all the times you've been hassled by the man when you would love to just whip out a letter from the late senator.
Wave this letter around. He may be gone, but the letter stands.
This still has force of law. Sovereign citizen.
The next time I get into an argument with my daughter's mother around here about her education, I'm going to pull that letter out, or I'm going to make a facsimile of it by writing it down right now on a pad.
I'm going to tell her that she needs a similar letter from a sitting senator so she can trump you on this.
If you were going to get a letters patent from a U.S. senator, who would you go to?
Why would I go to a U.S. senator?
Well, who would you get a letters patent from? The President of the United States?
Jake Paul.
I don't even know who that is. Is he one of the Property Brothers?
He's a YouTuber.
Jake Paul, a YouTuber.
Yeah, don't you think that would be better? Like,
is he the one that took the pictures of the kid that hung himself in Japan?
Yeah, I think it's his brother.
Yeah, okay.
No, you just want somebody that most people running the hostel or police station in wherever country you're in will recognize.
Linda Evangelista. You know what, J-Lo? If I had a letters patent from J-Lo, that would get me in anywhere.
You want somebody with a big overseas following.
Yeah,
somebody who was on Baywatch or Maybe Will Smith.
What about that? What about Benny from ABBA? Who isn't going to be impressed with that?
Excuse me, sir. I know you have me dead to rights here, but what would Benny, what would Bjorn Ulvaeus say if he were here? I think we know. In the case of quackery, these fake doctors who would purport to sell this stuff would often, in the 19th century, they would come with letters, fake letters from the Duke of whatever, saying, "I commend to you the skin ointments of Dr. Formaldicus."
Well, we saw this in a recent episode about all the great diamond hoaxes of the mid-19th century. What the letters patent figured in there with Lord such and such.
And it's easy to make fun of this stuff and think of it as a fun old-timey thing, except for the fact that you can no longer buy cow dewormer in America's agricultural supply stores because everybody in America with an IQ under a certain point has read on Facebook that is a cure for COVID.
Cow dewormer.
Yeah. The same people who thought it was bleach or hydroxychloroquine or whatever it was.
So people are
buying
cow dewormer.
People are buying cow strength dewormer, and I think just chugging it like normally they would be chugging Michelob or whatever.
Cow dewormer, a main character in the movie Animal House. So you're saying that it's not that we can't buy cow dewormer because it's a controlled substance.
No,
but we can't buy it because it's just the shelves are bare.
The shelves are bare because of the rush for the magical healing powers of cow dewormer.
Does it work to deworm a human? Is it ultimately going to increase people's health by removing worms they didn't know they had?
That would be funny if it doesn't cure COVID, but everybody in America suddenly has amazing digestion and their
great
skin
nutrition.
Looks great. And we did it. Dr. Fauci created this Chinese virus just to fool us into deworming.
Yeah.
And it worked.
It's amazing. You think that the people of Arkansas are going to die of COVID, but in fact, they become the healthiest people in America.
He was playing 9-dimensional chess all along. Like if you look at a map of COVID outbreaks and you look at a map of worm outbreaks, it's like the reverse color.
So are patent medicines or quackery, is this a commonplace feature in other parts of the world? I mean, I know in Africa, there's a lot of sort of quackery that is in the form of sorcery.
Well, famously, you've got wealthy East Asian people who will buy up all the bear powder and rhino horn and, whatever else they think will help them to get it up.
I want to know what the Australians fall for, what the Belgians fall for.
We need a list of, just to make us feel better about ourselves in dumb America.
Actually, what I would like a list of is all of the nations of the world we have insulted, and then I want to go through the other nations and give them equal time.
Oh, I see. Even on the show.
Yeah. I want to start. That's right. There's the list of nations we've personally insulted off the show is all the nations of the world, except Equatorial Guinea. We never.
But if somehow we've missed Hungary.
No. We've covered Hungary.
If we've missed Nepal,
right?
For example, you want to know something mean you can say about Nepal.
Dalbat is not good for breakfast. I'm going to say that right out of the gate. That is one thing about Nepal that I want everyone to know.
Is Dalbat the king?
They eat Dalbat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it's fine for dinner, but it's not good for breakfast.
Is that the yak butter stuff?
Breakfast. No, it's just lentils.
Oh, it's got dal in it.
It's dal. Yeah, it's Dalbat. And then you put whatever else.
Other nations don't always have breakfast. We have this idea that there are certain breakfast foods that must be carefully partitioned from the rest of the day. And weirdly, we put all our most delicious food there, bacon and pancakes and alphabets. And we say you're a loser if you're eating pancakes or alphabets at 6 p.m. But whereas other countries will be like, nope. Do you like kippers? That's breakfast food.
I don't know. I've never kippered.
You can't always do that joke.
In North Vietnam, pho is a breakfast food.
Korean, if you ride a bus to work in South Korea, it will smell like kimchi because everyone had their delicious kimchi breakfast. It's all cultural construct, this idea that there's a morning kind of a food.
I didn't know I needed another reason not to ride a bus in South Korea, but there it is. Add it to the pile.
So, unfortunately, patent medicines and quackery, it's not old-timey. It's as lively a discussion in America as it's ever been. And this idea that it's linked to politics, you might think of as new. But in fact, as we will see, that goes back at least to the mid-20th century and the Laetrile scare and the Laetrile wars that kind of peaked in the 1970s. As you've pointed out, Laetrile comes from nature.
It does. It comes from apricot seeds and lots of different sort of seeds.
Stone fruits, yeah.
Stone fruits.
It was
also a great autobiography title.
It was synthesized first as long ago as 1830 by two French chemists, Pierre Robequet and Antoine Boutron-Charlard, who synthesized the very first glycoside, which is kind of a complicated sugar-based molecule. The problem with this particular glycoside is that the thing attached to a sugar is a nitrile group, which has carbon and nitrogen in it. And if you treat that with if you get that involved in other chemical reactions, that will immediately give off carbon and nitrogen, which is a cyanide ion. So
it's good stuff.
So you shouldn't be chewing on your nectarine pits, America.
Now, this would be a great technology to make cyanide, but we don't actually have a dearth of ways to make cyanide.
I have never needed a way to make cyanide, so the fact that I have zero ways to produce it has been perfect for me in my life.
But this was...
zero in, zero out.
This was a discovery that wasn't... The intention was not to discover cyanide.
No. This is, amygdalin is a naturally occurring substance. These guys were the first to isolate it. And the reason why, if you ever read a mystery novel and somebody gets poisoned with cyanide, the detective will also often point out that it smells like bitter almonds. That's the telltale clue. And that's because...
It's frequently derived from bitter almonds.
Yes, the more bitter the almond, the more actual cyanide anion you have in there. The scientists who first synthesized this glycoside did not immediately try to find pharmaceutical applications for it, but as early as 1890, people were testing what was called amygdalin, this first glycoside, for anti-cancer properties. So, it's been 130 years of people checking to see if amygdalin might help with cancer. And it does not. We're in 130 straight years of no results here.
This was due to a kind of like a logical pathway of thinking that because this compound adhered to these other compounds that also then were related to it was a process that an amateur scientist with a little bit of sort of narrative flexibility could draw a connection like a chemical. They could propose a chemical connection that actually could potentially relate to
at least plausible enough to separate desperate people from their money.
I'm equivocating, but there was at least in the beginning, and I'm equivocating because it's such a tenuous connection that it falls into this category of like sunlight and positive thinking might help your hair grow back.
And maybe the fact that it's got cyanide in it would not be a deal breaker. The fact that it's toxic is like, yes, that's how it attacks those tumors.
Right.
That's what you're going to want here.
How quickly after it was this attempted connection was made, did it fall into the hands of the quacks? But unscrupulous people who were promoting this knowing that it didn't work.
Like not really until the 1950s, I think, is when the name Laetrile is first coined by a father and son duo.
Always suspect.
Yeah, I'm not going to like two doctors who are a dad and his kid.
Right.
What a weird dynamic.
You wouldn't go see a band that was a father and son duo, would you?
Except that happens all the time now, right? With these old bands.
Yeah, right.
All these legacy bands.
Zach Starkey in there playing drums for Led Zeppelin, but you don't, or Wolfgang Amadeus Van Halen.
Exactly.
Playing with Van Halen. I didn't go see that.
You wouldn't let your daughter in your band?
Oh,
What about Jeff Tweedy and his son? They seem nice.
Yeah, I suppose that's right.
Yeah, it's something to do.
I think it's better that your children have their own musical, adventures and not kind of like glom onto your classic rock band. But that's just me.
Yeah, unless you know of any earlier precedent, I'm going to blame Ernst Krebs Sr. and his son, unlikely named Ernst Krebs Jr., both of them going by doctor. Senior actually was a doctor, pharmacist who got a medical degree in 1903 when it was a lot easier to just go to some surgery college and say you're a doctor. His primary claim to fame was something he called syrup leptinol, which is a remedy he said would work for all kinds of lung stuff, asthma, whooping cough. And it was he claimed it was an old Indian remedy made from parsley. So basically, if you have trouble breathing or if you got a cough, just eat more parsley. This is why. Maybe this is why.
I've heard that even now.
I've never heard a Middle Eastern person cough, and it's all the tabbouleh they're eating.
And listen to me, I'm coughing, and I haven't had any parsley in weeks.
Go eat some chimichurri, stat. 10 cc's of chimichurri. His son also went by Dr. Krebs, although he was in fact a medical school dropout. The closest thing he got to a doctorate was in 1973 when the American Christian College in Tulsa, Oklahoma, after he presented for an hour about the magic of Laetrile, awarded him an honorary doctorate, even though they were not accredited by the state of Oklahoma to give doctorates. Right. So not the best degree you could get.
Well, you and I are both Kentucky colonels, so it's not, we don't have a lot of room to talk.
I actually got some more. I've been getting Kentucky Colonel mail. I need to deliver you. We'll do that at the end of the show. I'll deliver you the latest. Okay. Maybe you're getting it at home now. Did you give them your address when you donated?
I don't think I got that. I think I probably gave them the omnibus P.O. box.
Well, spoilers for later, but they want us to order homecoming tickets.
Oh, okay.
So between the two of them, these guys were father and son shysters who had a series of weird things they called mutagen and pangamic acid, which in order to keep from being regulated, they pretended was vitamin B15.
And is the sense, and this is I guess the overarching question about all this sort of quackery, like at what point is it a pure deception? I mean, we're experiencing this in contemporary politics. There's a lot of pseudoscience. There's a lot of conspiracy theory, and a lot of very culpable people. But it works because there are so many people anxious to believe. Mm-hmm. Where is the line between the scientist who knows enough science to know that he's lying and the pseudoscientist who truly believes his quack premise?
I mean, you'll never know as long as the quacks are making money hand over fist. That's what's suspicious to me. Like they have no reason to interrogate the actual success of their claims. They don't care as long as they're making money. And whatever claim makes them more money, that's the win to them.
But isn't there ever a deathbed confession where someone goes, ha ha, I knew it all along? Like, I keep waiting for there to be some L. Ron Hubbard letter where he's like, lol. But, at some point they get into their own story. Right?
I feel like the closest thing we have to that with the Krebses is the fact that the origin of how they came up with Laetrile, they embroidered several times over the years for legal reasons. In a way that makes me think they knew what they were doing. Like in the earliest case, they just say, yeah, we just started doing some trials in 1951 and we liked, we'd made the semi-synthetic version of amygdalin. We called it Laetrile and we started giving it to people. We don't have those records anymore, but it was so promising.
Right.
Whereas later when they talked about this, they tried to backdate the creation of Laetrile to crucially before the passage of different Pure Food and Drug Acts.
I see.
Like, hey, we've been making this stuff since the 30s. Back then we called it sarcarcanase.
Oh yeah,
and in
sarcarcanase.
Fact, sarcarcanase was a thing they were making as some mold they had found on. They were making, for some reason they were interested in bourbon flavoring agents. They had a side business on, with an alcoholic side business. Mm-hmm. And this bourbon flavoring agent, some kind of weird mold or fungus was growing in the barrel. And they were like, this is it. This is a miracle stuff. We called it sarcarcanase.
Oh, wait a minute. They invented Southern Comfort.
So later they try to pretend that Laetrile, we were calling it sarcarcanase, this thing we were selling in the 30s.
Yeah.
But, that was different. That was barrel mold. And then when they ran out of barrel mold, they decided to start synthesizing something like, some semi-synthetic treatment of the stuff they were grinding up out of apricot pits.
Don't run out of barrel mold.
Right. They only had the one barrel, apparently. And also over the years, the fact that when they talk about the mechanism of what this does for cancer, it's extremely sketchy. In the earliest days, they say this cures cancer. And then after more government scrutiny, they say, well, it controls
cancer.
You know, it attacks the cells that would attack the cells that attack the cancer or something. And then later, you know, when they're calling it a vitamin, because if you call it vitamin B17, you can avoid regulation on a pharmaceutical. This is a supplement. Then they're saying it's a preventative. Better take a ton of this and then you won't get cancer. And then later it's like, well, this will ease the symptoms of cancer because it's so good at. So, you know, it's a moving goalpost.
We should say that the FDA, the United States Food and Drug Administration, was only founded in 1906.
As a result of Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, about how gross your food is.
Right. And it has been consistently playing, as we're fond of saying here, a game of whack-a-mole with all of the different, you know, trying to do trying to do a yeoman's job of regulating food and drugs. And just when you're busy over here focusing on food, then the quacks come out with the drugs. You turn your attention there. Food goes to hell.
And in fact, most of the current authority by which the U.S. government, the federal government, oversees safety of that stuff did not start until the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938, right. Which is when kind of testing of medical devices and treatments began at the federal level, which is why these guys tried to backdate their stuff before 38 or updates to the act in 1962. This is a recent, even though it's been going on for all of our lifetimes, it's a comparatively recent development.
So the Krebs get away with peddling this stuff until...
the state of California starts investigating pretty early in the 50s. And quickly, they're the first to discover that they cannot duplicate any of these results that these guys are claiming as to how apricot pits will cure cancer. And
we should say right away that cancer sucks, and it's so difficult to not just. I mean, it's so difficult to understand and so difficult to accept, to even comprehend that it's a ripe area for.
It leads to desperate, confused people,
right,
who are already being, you know, because there's no cure, they're being provided with a variety of treatments, experimental ideas, all with their own compromises and devastating side effects. And it's huge. Every year, 2 million Americans. This year, 2 million Americans will get cancer. 600,000 Americans will die of cancer. That's a COVID-sized chunk of the country.
Wow.
Every year. And it's not an all-time high. When our story begins in the 1950s, cancer deaths were a quarter higher and still on the way up. When do you think cancer peaked in America?
1980.
Pretty close, yeah. 1990. All the smokers who, who were quitting, but, now we're getting into the age where all their, when half of America smoked during the 60s and 70s, that started to decline around 1980, but by then it was too late for those lungs.
Well, and also the asbestosis, all those people working in...
All the asbestos people.
Yeah, shoveling asbestos.
And I guess that it probably would have been even higher. I was considering the fact that, one thing that raises cancer rates is other stuff getting cured, other diseases declining. Cancer is the thing that gets you because you already survived the 10 other things that would have killed you in the 1830s or the 1930s.
Yeah, of course. As the average age increases, you're just that much more vulnerable to cancer.
So
because you see that all the time. An 89-year-old dies of cancer.
Sure.
And you think, well, 89's a pretty good run.
Good job. I mean, sorry about your prostate, but 100 years ago, you would have been dead in your 50s from
30s.
Yeah. So, that's the kind of thing where, even though it's declined since then, it's probably been it would have been a much steeper decline in actual, incidence of people of the same age if you could equal all that out, if you could level all that out.
Maybe a futurelink will work on that graph for us.
But
4-dimensional graph.
So in the 1950s, it's a huge target for people making magic, quacky cures, and because cynically, it's a huge market, and it's a desperate market. Well,
and so much of what we think of as modern medicine is also, even as late as the 1950s, still kind of coalescing. A lot of our current technology and understanding of the body hasn't really hasn't all settled down. I in researching vitamin B17, I discovered that all of the vitamins, and there are 13 vitamins, all of the vitamins we only isolated between 1913 and 1948.
Back then, we were just chewing on orange peel for the hell of it.
So there were no, prior to World War I, there was no sense of, there was no way to get a vitamin outside of eating it in a food.
Yeah.
And that was true for some of the vitamins as late as 1950.
And in many cases, like the connection between that particular compound and health was not even known. I mean, anecdotally, you would be like, well, you won't get beriberi if you eat, whatever. But,
sure, suck on a lime.
But that was all. Yeah, that was it. To be fair, pharmaceuticals is one area where a lot of people, sometimes diseases do get cured by just somebody chewing on the right plant.
Well, in my own case, and I've talked about it on the show before.
What did you chew on?
Well, right now I'm chewing on a leather strap because we both prepared for this show. No, I've talked before about my bipolar disorder and how the drug that ultimately worked for me, a drug called Lamictal or Lamotrigine, depending on which the brand you're talking about.
You can mention them both. Neither advertises on the show.
Lamotrigine and Lamictal. Go forth.
Ask your doctor if
Lamotrigine is right for you. But it was originally developed as an anti-seizure medicine, and the recognition that it worked as a bipolar drug was, again, just like licking a frog in the Amazon. It was somewhat accidental. So there still is, or not accidental, but coincidental.
Yeah.
So there's still within the drug community all this accident and sense that, well, this didn't work for weight loss, but it turns out it improves your eyesight.
But we're 60 or 70 years into the kind of the modern checking of these claims about Laetrile, and nobody's ever been able to validate any of them. As early as the mid-50s, the state of California can't duplicate those results. And when they offered to treat cancer patients in a LA County hospital to do it, to test Laetrile in that environment, the Krebs say, yeah, we'll do it, but you have to put this guy, our advocate, in charge of the ward and the test. And the state of California says,
the counting of votes in Arizona.
Right. The state of California says, no, that's not what we're going to do. And that pattern kind of continues throughout this story of the Krebs kind of dodging and weaving. But the story kind of fundamentally changes. Laetrile became a real cause celeb. Like if you've never heard of any other weird quackery thing, you might have heard of Laetrile, and that's because of how high profile it became in the 60s and the 70s. In 1956, a man named Andrew McNaughton met the Krebs. He's called the godfather of Laetrile today. He was the son of the commander of the Canadian Armed Forces during World War II, General A.G.L. McNaughton, who was later a president of the United Nations Security Council. But this was a guy who, he's
got a letters patent.
Yeah. He's got a great story. He was a chief test pilot for the Canadian Air Force, but he made his fortune after World War II in a less promising way. It was basically gun running. He contributed World War II war surplus to, he could resell to Israel. Later, he sent it to Batista in Cuba, but it turned out he was a double agent actually working for Castro, such that when Castro won the revolution, he made McNaughton an honorary citizen of Cuba. So the guy's a gun runner, and he loved Laetrile. He was intrigued by the fact that the Krebs seemed to be a punching bag for government, and so he founded companies and factories to synthesize Laetrile, and was interested in publicity, getting books and articles written about, 500,000 copies of Laetrile Control for Cancer hit store shelves, funded by this guy. And this is a real big story. The story of Laetrile will be all these government skeptics thinking you can't take away my apricot pits.
So it's a strange combination of or not maybe strange, but a combination of suspicion of government expertise, now going back to the 1950s, kind of in some ways overlapping just like conspiracies of the elders of Zion level of belief that there is a cabal that involves the government and corporations, but also then the endorsement of these fringe celebrities that aren't actually doctors, but their endorsement gives a imprimatur of legitimacy to the crankiness.
One of my favorite characters in here is a biology professor at Loyola who claimed he could cure breast cancer with Laetrile, named Dr. Manor. He used to go by, he had a PhD, he was a professor, but he would often in his Laetrile work, he would go by Harold Manor DN, which he later said stood for Doctor of Nothing. But he was, he would just inject just massive doses of this. Well, I mean, he was using Laetrile or amygdalin in a base of meat tenderizer. So he would inject mice with these with tumors with these mass quantities of meat tenderizer, and surprisingly enough, bits of the mice would die and fall off because he was injecting them with meat tenderizer.
Oh wait, so the mouse wouldn't die, just parts of the mouse?
Oh, the mouse would probably almost certainly die.
Right.
But this is a great sign that the injected area immediately became an abscess. Look, the tumor's gone. And it's just because he's using these enzymes of meat tenderizer as a medium for his
cyanide.
For his cyanide, yeah. That's what you got to do when you're injecting cyanide into somebody. Make sure you're also just melting their flesh-melting enzymes. A big thing that, because of the increasing U.S. regulation, a big step in this story is what happens when a San Diego school teacher named Cecile Hoffman has read about Laetrile due to this kind of McNaughton-funded publishing blast and cannot get, she's had a mastectomy. She's worried about the cancer coming back. She cannot get Laetrile for her cancer scare. But she finds a guy named Ernesto Contreras who has a clinic in Tijuana, and sure, he'll track down some of McNaughton's amygdalin and give her some. And suddenly, south of the border, Contreras's outfit becomes a destination for people who are Americans who have heard of Laetrile but can't get it due to government regulation. So he founds it's called Oasis of Hope Hospital in Tijuana, which is still
an oasis of hope.
I guess. I mean, it's true. It is providing hope, but that's all it's providing.
Yeah.
Because it's not actually providing medical care for these desperate cancer patients. But Hoffman was sure that this Laetrile had saved her life, and she formed the IACVF, International Association of Cancer Victims and Friends. I assume friends of the victims, not friends of the cancer.
Yeah. Friends of the cancer. Well, the presumably healed cancer people.
And it later turned to cancer victors and friends when when the messaging of victims started to seem a little dubious. The fact is, she was only an enthusiastic supporter for a few more years before actually her breast cancer returned and had metastasized, and she died in 1969. But by that time, it was too late. She had created this kind of massive lobbying group and this movement of this well-funded, well-publicized healthcare system in Mexico providing terrible healthcare. It's
the QAnon syndrome where any apocalyptic cult, the fact that the date of the apocalypse comes and goes without an apocalypse, or the date of the big revelation that Hillary Clinton is eating babies comes and goes and no revelation is forthcoming, it doesn't dissipate the movement. In a lot of ways, it reinforces it.
No, there's a case of there's a doctor named John Richardson in this story who called himself a metabolic doctor. He was a San Francisco GP who started giving cancer patients Laetrile and was charging them $2,000 and multiplied his income 17-fold in a matter of years by doing so. He claimed that they had great benefits and dramatically improved. And when his results were examined, it turned out that Richardson had to admit that, most of his patients had died. Oh. And what do you say in that situation is, well, I probably didn't give them enough Laetrile.
Well, you can say they don't have cancer anymore.
100% sort of cure rate. So he just keeps upping the dosage, I'm going to give you vitamins and Laetrile. in the 1960s, it gets big enough that not just the state of California, but the U.S. government and various medical associations start cracking down. Dr. Krebs Jr. is jailed at one point. One of the funny details that comes out at trial is that he has a vanity license plate advertising vitamin B15, one of his patent medicaments.
B15, not B17.
But yeah, B15 I think is pargomic acid, their other kind of cure-all before they renamed Laetrile vitamin B17, so that it couldn't be in hopes that it wouldn't be regulated as a drug, but instead treated as a
yeah, right. What is it? Supplement?
A health supplement. Yeah, a nutritional supplement. But when this Dr. Richardson guy was arrested, that kind of made this into a big political cause. Because now, look, this is big government actually coming for our beloved doctors here.
Jackbooted thugs trying to take away our sheep farming.
A former Stanford lab tech created the Committee for Freedom of Choice in Cancer Therapy, which sounds exactly like something that might get formed to some anti-mask or anti-vax group that would get formed today.
Right. Why not have freedom of choice?
Sure. It's closely allied with, as you might expect, arch conservative side of the political spectrum back then. It's aligned closely with the John Birch Society, which is already skeptical of government and sure that on many levels, these bureaucracies that intrude into your life on a daily basis are doing so for malicious ways, even if they're stopping you from taking cyanide. It's, Today we would think it's the silliest possible thing that these people are dying on the wall of not taking a life-saving vaccine.
Wait a minute.
But back then, the Birchers were literally yelling for their right to eat cyanide. And
based not on the evidence of cyanide being proven to affect cancer, but based entirely on a kind of negative supposition that the FDA isn't earnest in trying to regulate bad food and drugs.
It's not trustworthy.
Is in fact part of a global cabal of people interested in controlling your mind.
What do medicines and treatments do? They save lives. Who gives you those? Doctors. Who's stopping them? The federal government.
I see.
So, you've got...
Even if those doctors are awarded a degree from the Tulsa Christian Institute of
And
Bibles.
even if they're all making suddenly suspiciously millions of dollars and building fancy new clinics in Mexico, the Oasis of Hope still exists today, and it's a particular magnet, I think, for desperate British cancer patients who have heard of Laetrile. It's people crossing the Atlantic to get poisoned in Tijuana.
There is convincing evidence that you can go have LASIK eye surgery in Mexico for a lot cheaper than in the United States.
I'll tell you, I know some elderly people who are watching friends retire to south of the border just because their retirement is screwed. Their money's going to go farther if they wind up on a beach in Costa Rica or Mexico.
Shh, don't give it away.
That's the Roderick plan.
That's my
we
plan
call
too.
it. So suddenly, with the muscle of the John Birch movement behind it, now there's whole speakers circuits and John Birch bookstores that are marketing Laetrile to a credulous audience, and now it becomes a partisan issue. Where the big government's against it and liberty-loving little folks like you and I have to stand up to it. 27 states end up passing laws specifically allowing Laetrile treatments.
Let me guess which states.
Yeah, I think we could all draw that map pretty easily. And in fact, in 1977, a Laetrile case comes before an Oklahoma judge who it seems is very sympathetic to the Laetrile claims. It's clear from the trial. And he turns down a ruling that, in fact, the FDA has no right to
regulate food and drugs?
To regulate food and drug for terminally ill patients. This is the line that...
because why not?
This is the line that Judge Bohannon draws. Exactly. And that's the argument. Because why not? Look, these people are dying anyway. Who are we to tell them they shouldn't be, enriching all these quacks?
Weird.
And this is, in fact, later overturned by a U.S. Supreme Court decision in 1979. But the regulatory results are delayed such that well into the 1980s, terminally ill patients are trying out all kinds of quackery based on this Oklahoma decision. By the end of the 1970s boom, like at least 70,000 American patients are taking Laetrile for cancer.
70,000?
Yeah.
By when?
Yeah, the mid-70s, I think.
Wow, 70,000 people taking cyanide derived from apricot pits.
But bad media starts. A 2-year-old boy in Massachusetts named Chad Green has his leukemia brought into remission with chemo, but his parents believe in this metabolic therapy. In other words, Laetrile and meat tenderizer. And he starts to show signs of cyanide toxicity. So Massachusetts authorities try to have him declared a war to the state, leading to this massive court battle, which leads to his parents spiriting him away to Mexico so Dr. Contreras can keep giving him cyanide, and he died at the age of 2 from cyanide poisoning.
Ouch.
By all appearances.
Even though chemo was working.
Chemo was working. And Dr. Contreras, of course, is, saying, hey, this kid has leukemia, and this kid died of leukemia, but look what a pleasant death Laetrile gave him here in beautiful Tijuana. And this is the kind of story that makes the papers. And then it gets worse in 1980 when beloved screen actor Steve McQueen is diagnosed with it's a cancer of what's it called?
Mesothelioma.
Mesothelioma.
Which is connected to asbestos.
Yes. At first he thinks it's, he's smoked his whole life. When he starts to get coughing and shortness of breath, he stops smoking, but it keeps getting worse. And it turns out it's not in his lungs. It's in the mesothelium. It's just the tissue around the chest organs, I think.
Yeah. That the asbestos fibers managed to worm their way toward.
And and he had a bunch of stories where it could clearly have been asbestos, right? He was
shoveling it in his grandfather's attic or something like that.
I think it was also maybe a fireproof stuff he had to wear in his day job just to do Hollywood stunt work,
Well, he was a car racer.
Yeah, it was during his car racing. You're right.
Yeah.
So he's wearing fireproof safety equipment just stuffed with asbestos. But Steve McQueen is desperate, and in 1980 he heads down to Mexico
because he did all the normal cancer treatments, but it was ineffective, and so it's in this family of why not, right?
Yeah, it's the Judge Luther Bohannon argument. So he heads south of the border and has a de-licensed Texas dentist giving him Laetrile at his clinic. And he gives glowing treatments to the press about how much the miracle drug Laetrile, but hard to conceal the fact that he then dies a few months later.
See, I think he's burying the lead. I think what he really should have been saying is that orthodontists should be who you seek out for cancer treatments, right? Like that seems to be the innovation.
Going to dentists.
Instead of oncologist, orthodontist. It's very close on the list of doctors.
Because it starts with O?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I totally understand this impulse of, like we were saying, cancer is just so tricky because nobody knows how well any of the treatments work and they're all going to kick your ass. And, when one fails, there's always a bunch of, because there's so much work into cancer going on, there's always a bunch of other experimental things.
Right. Things go into remission and then they reappear mysteriously.
So the timeline is tricky. Like I'm sure you and I have both known people who have fought cancer. And I remember when Alex Trebek was sick, he was, his first round of chemo went well, and then he had to do more chemo and that didn't go as well. And his doctor put him on an experimental thing that really wiped him out and had all these terrible side effects. And he actually said, his book ends with him saying, just last night, I told my family, I've had enough. Like, I am not taking any more experimental stuff. I'm going to do this course and then we'll just see what happens. Like I'm tired of what the fight is doing to me. And I want to go better than that. And like, I had to read that audiobook out loud. Like that's my voice on the audiobooks, with Alex being like, I just can't anymore with this rounds of cancer treatment. And that is 100% true. Like that's what cancer does to somebody is it puts them in that situation where boy, I'm making my life terrible and I'm making this hellish, but is death worse or not? Like it's an impossible ethical and future telling problem.
I had a friend say the exact same thing. Just said after rounds and rounds of chemo,
this is worse than death.
Yeah,
it's an awful thing. But.
I'm done. And it wasn't even resignation. It was just a feeling like, well, this is worse than dying, and that's a profound feeling. Why wouldn't you, in that case, snort Epsom salts or?
but super common. This idea of somebody on their deathbed who just knows it's time to go and badly wants to go is not uncommon. It's centuries old. It's a trope for a reason.
It's very human.
We can sense that. We can sense that this is not life anymore. And even though I don't know what oblivion is, it's got to be better than this.
Also, and this I think is yet to be proved by science, but we all die. That's my theory.
From what I've seen,
so it has to happen, right?
I believe that's true. One to a customer. So maybe you want a good one with some controller. And in Alex's case, he was right. He had a very peaceful end with his family and friends. Which maybe would not have been true with another 6 rounds of awful invasive things.
Right.
But the Laetrile really gave us a peek into the future of this politicizing of medical treatment, to the degree that, people saw that you could enrich yourselves, by, not just with some slick patter to desperate people, but with ideological and specifically anti-government messaging. And it's still making a ton of people rich today.
What's interesting is that it's the place, maybe more than any other, where the left and right collide. And I'm talking about the kind of the fringe right and the fringe left, both for various reasons, anti-government, anti-science, but also like what feels like kind of positive, holistic version of spirituality-based science.
Somebody on the right wouldn't say Eastern medicine, but they're going to get the same effects as the person on Vashon who won't get a measles shot.
Yeah, like right now, the various there are whole categories of treatment of unproven treatment for cancer that include changes in diet, electromagnetic cures for cancer, energy-based cures, plants and funguses. Now, these are just categories under which there are numerous enough versions that it warrants a category. Aromatherapy, spiritual healing, Ayurvedic, or kind of like other cultures, Greek cancer cures, what is
that?
That's a kind of
put tzatziki on the tumor?
No, it's an intravenous application. There's a Germanic new medicine, which is basically just an anti-Semitic.
Is that right?
Yeah, theory.
Make your Aryan body stronger?
Well, it's a theory that all modern medicine is just a Jewish conspiracy to keep us from Valhalla or whatever. Shamanistic methods. Like cancer is kind of a clearinghouse for every kind of fringe and groups of people. Yoga instructors and white nationalists are united only in their suspicion of vaccines,
their love of weird medicine,
right, and belief that the actual cures for what ails us are intentionally obscured by this government/medical global conspiracy.
One interesting side effect of the high-profile battles over Laetrile in the 1970s, which kind of discredited as a cancer drug, is even though it's still around, it's been touted as a cure for other difficult-to-treat illnesses, like
bipolar? Maybe I should try it.
Why are you not sucking cyanide? No, but everything from AIDS to arthritis to multiple sclerosis, like any kind of chronic or difficult-to-treat disease, people, the Laetrile hucksters will be like, well, what cures AIDS, obviously, is the healing power of cyanide. So it's still around today, despite the fact that it's mostly famous as a dangerous, discredited thing.
I mean, the hardest platform to advance is that death is inevitable and not always great. I mean, often uncomfortable.
You wouldn't vote for the candidate that starts his stump speech with, "Death comes unexpectedly."
We all die, and sometimes it sucks. And the one thing that it always has in common is that the people left behind will miss you, in the words of Keanu Reeves.
I don't even know where that's from. Point Break.
No, Keanu Reeves famously did an interview.
Oh, he just says this,
where somebody said what's your Oh no, it was Stephen Colbert asked him, "What do you think happens after you die?" Because he's a notorious Catholic and wanted to know Keanu Reeves' feelings on the afterlife.
Notorious Catholic Stephen Colbert. It's hard to believe they still let him loose.
And Keanu sat and thought about it for a second. He said, "Well, I know that the people that knew you will miss you." And that concludes Laetrile. Entry 696.MK1618. Certificate number 527 in the omnibus. Futurelings, in the unlikely event that social media still exists in your era, and in the even more unlikely event that you have conquered death, please spend your interminable hours, your long vampiric hours.
We have new existential crises in the post-death era.
Yeah, right. What to do with all the time.
I do feel like future listeners are likely to be listening from a time in which cancer is no longer in super. Like, it does seem like we're kind of at an inflection point now where lots of new therapies are coming online.
Yeah, let's hope. But at the same time, how long do you really want to live?
Yeah.
And also, you're really clogging up the highways. You know what I'm saying?
You're not in great shape, even if you survive that bout of cancer at 95. You are still a 95-year-old.
Anyway, you can get these and more opinions by logging on to any social media platform and searching @Ken Jennings. And you can also find some archives of my deep thoughts at John Roderick. You can email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. You can seek us out, and we hope you do, on patreon.com/omnibusproject. Please support the show. We are a listener-supported show, and we started doing that after we left our corporate overlords at the Food and Drug Administration, who were funding our show as part of the conspiracy against health.
Disinformation campaign. Yeah, why did we originally call Omnibus Vaccines Work?
Yeah, vaccineswork.com. No, don't go to vaccineswork.com. I cannot vouch for what's there. But do go to patreon.com/omnibusproject and support the show with your donation of any size. And you can also seek out other futurelings who will hopefully convince you to support the show because they're fans of the show and fun and smart people.
Thanks to Mark for suggesting your topic for this show.
And you can send us actual things, including your own quackery, your own patent medicines, and cough syrups and cancer cures, to P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155.
A lot of those, I've just realized, a lot of those patent medicines got legitimized in the 20th century by turning them into soft drinks. Really?
Oh, right, Dr. Pepper. He's not a real doctor.
Half of our soda case came from Southern pharmacists trying to cure psoriasis, right?
I wish they still had the cocaine in some of those pops.
Yeah, when they had that new Coke Zero, and they're like, "This is our best formulation ever." I was like, "Really? Better than the cocaine
I feel
one?"
like the cocaine one probably was pretty darn good.
I had told you I got this thing from the Kentucky Colonels. They're inviting us to their open house weekend in November, which includes like 6 different bourbon and horse racing themed events. It's exactly what you would hope the state of Kentucky would be inviting you to. There's a bourbon museum with a bourbon tasting. Then there's a private bourbon tasting. Then there's a cocktail party. Evening includes multiple bourbon tastings. Mm-hmm. And then there's a bourbon raffle.
A bourbon raffle?
Yeah, not even in connection with the bourbon tasting or the of the various kinds.
You know, I was just in Kentucky, and it occurred to me to try and reach out to my fellow Kentucky colonels.
Yeah, how do you
to say
you don't want to go hang out at headquarters?
But I didn't do it, and partly it was because I was busy visiting graveyards and didn't have the time to socialize. But also, I don't live within a bourbon-based economy, either do you.
Yeah.
So none of those events...
I guess we can enjoy the horse racing.
But it was a bourbon-fueled horse racing, right?
Isn't all horse racing?
Sitting around drinking mint juleps.
But anyway, this is just one of the many perks we get as Kentucky Colonels is we get invited to fundraisers like this. I did write the Kentucky Colonels a check for their nonprofit work, just so I feel like my colonelcy is doing some good work.
Yeah,
back in the Commonwealth is it a Commonwealth
of Kentucky? It's the one Commonwealth left.
No, there's a few.
Well, it's the Commonwealth of Connecticut, right? Or it's Ohio has a weird flag.
Virginia has
Virginia
and Massachusetts, I believe. is
Commonwealths of
yes, Kentucky is a Commonwealth.
USA.
I'm glad, like, nobody else heard us do this, or we would lose our colonelcies.
4 states are Commonwealths: Kentucky, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. That's the one we missed, Pennsylvania.
People were probably yelling Pennsylvania.
Well, the Pennsylvania, we've done so many shows about Pennsylvania, you would think we would know that by now.
Listeners, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come, but if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.